what I prepared, I'm obviously going to talk about our campaign in the 50th Congressional District for the House of Representatives. I also prepared something in solidarity with the comrade in Seattle, Kshama Sawant, who's obviously facing the far-right recall. Yes. Why we're here for our fundraiser. And, really going to also talk about the kind of pressing need for, something that we hear a lot about on the internet, this like kind of nebulous phrase called left unity and whatever, and also, our role as socialists in this coming era. So, first and foremost, big shout out to Socialist Alternative, to Marco. I first off love being on any panel where I get to hang out with Marco because he's like good people. One of the reasons I became an organizer, really, I'm gonna take a moment just tell the story because I don't think people here know it. I was actually just some random person that had no idea about politics whatsoever until in 2016 when Trump came to the convention center. I was wandering around and I saw this person who ended up being Marco wearing a beret, leading a bunch of people in a sit-down protest when they were declared an unlawful assembly. And I remember just sitting there and being like, damn, this guy knows what's going on, So I wanted to very much learn about politics and, very honored to just always share space with Marco because they are the real deal. They're a socialist that puts their money where their mouth is, goes out into the community and organizes a mass movement from scratch. So without getting too distracted, definitely want to give a shout out to Marco and a shout out to the SA comrades who organized this opportunity for us to talk about our campaigns. Very similar in a situation like to Marco, our campaign is a working class campaign, and we're running for a federal office that's also susceptible to the top two anti-democratic system in California, which makes June also a very important day for us to see if we can actually make it to the full election, and get to participate in the so-called democracy that we live under. I grew up in the district. The district is kind of changing a little bit, but I still live in the district even as it's proposed. It's a pretty large district. It's primarily semi-rural. It's working class. A majority of the people who live in the district don't own their homes. The majority of the people who live in the district don't have $500 in savings. Unemployment is nearly double in the district what it is in the city of San Diego, for example. And these are real pressing issues that are plaguing not only my district, but the entire country, the entire world under capitalism. So, we cannot, and I cannot, just as an organizer, understate how important it is to organize, to be a part of an organization like all of us are, to build a movement like Marco is, because really that's going to be the only thing that saves us. I'm running under the platform of the Peace and Freedom Party. For those who don't know, the origins of the Peace and Freedom Party date all the way back to the 60s and 70s, back to the Black Panther Party and the anti-war movement that basically brought socialism into the electoral sphere to try and obviously point out the contradictions and hypocrisy of the capitalist system under these two warmongering parties that we currently have. And it was there that I got to learn about socialism. I didn't know anything about socialism as a working person, besides it was, something that economists talked about. And really that's why I'm feeling so empowered and just impassioned to speak out in solidarity with what's going on in Seattle, because we cannot really, understate how important unity and resistance is in this coming era that we're about to face as socialists, as organizers, and as people of conscience. We're seeing the panicked scramble of the ruling class to just basically uphold their anti-democratic rule, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing in Seattle specifically. And we can't even confuse for a second what we're seeing in Seattle with anything other than an attack on our movement from both sides of the Capitalist Party. These attacks, are a very clear reminder that the ruling class is more interested in going after our leaders of peaceful movements, than who are calling for social and economic justice, than the criminals who are bankrupting our society, than the people who are pillaging our society for profit, driven millions of people out into the streets, and countless others to early graves. They're obviously demonstrating once again, very clearly, that they are more interested in criminalizing and targeting our people than the people who are actually damaging our society. And really, the charges against Kshama Sawant stem from their role in the uprisings that happened last summer. And just for clarity for all of us here, I remember those uprisings. All of us here, a lot of us here, if not all of us, were a part of those uprisings, here locally, but also the ones that were going on nationwide. I remember millions of people who rose up against racist police terror. I remember thousands of peaceful marches that were met with violence from racist thugs like Defend East County and their allies in the police. I remember, news of funerals of people at our marches who were martyred essentially by this system.
I remember GoFundMes for people who were permanently disabled and disfigured by the police. And and something also that we didn't hear about during the uprisings were the countless stories of bravery, of courage, of sacrifice, of our people in our neighborhoods who rose up and recognized their power, some of them for the first times in their lives. And, basically seeing that we're in a class war and, that we didn't ourselves start, but that basically was thrust upon us. So there's a deliberate reason that we're not hearing about any of these amazing stories about what we saw in the uprising last summer, especially in the bogus recall of the comrade in Seattle. We're not hearing about any of that, of those working class narratives. We're only hearing about some dry, pedantic rules that allegedly were violated, which really, hidden in this legalistic argument and these overtures that the ruling class are making is a very clear window into their logic, right? They really don't care about stealing from the poor, privatizing vital resources, anything like all of that is fair game. But you dare to use your public office to basically call out, corporate exploiters, if you dare to, address fascistic police violence, that draws the immediate ire and the full fury of the ruling class. And all of us, all the people that have eyes that can see that, what's going on, we can see very clearly that, this is not new. This is very clearly what the system's all about. And, just to kind of compare, we saw the same thing on the attack on our comrades in Denver, Colorado, following the uprising around the murder of Elijah McLean, right? The people who murdered him, the people that are bragging on the social media about how they killed this innocent young man, were the ones walking free, the ones that didn't face any accountability until a mass movement of working class people rose up and challenged them in the streets. And now finally there's some, small tokens of justice that are now starting to be offered. But these attacks, right, are, against our comrades in Colorado, against the, Sawant in Seattle, are a part of a series, right? They're part of a series of tactical attacks aimed at our leaders who are seen as a threat to the status quo. And it's for those reasons that we have to really unite across our class to fight for our very existence, really. Right now we're on the precipice. And really what we're calling for and what we're seeing is a new era of a united front against fascism. And really we have to ask ourselves, what is our role as socialists going to be in that new era? It is clear, just from a cursory look, that our class has numerical superiority over the ruling class. We can see that our issue is not a numerical issue, but an organizational issue. And, it's our unfortunate inheritance from the previous counterinsurgencies of our parents, our grandparents' generations that, that were as a result of progressive movements that challenged the status quo. And really, it's that history that we have to remember, and it informs what I'm about to say next. Our movement, our socialist movement, cannot remain a movement of the fringe, right? It cannot, be something that is seen as an extreme movement, as extreme position. Our movement needs to be continuously made up of people like Marco that bring it into people's homes, that bring it into people's neighborhoods, and make it a digestible, real subject, because it is. It's something that's powered incredibly by love, and we need to demonstrate that love in everything that we do as organizers. We have to unite with our people where they're at, in their workplaces, in their schools, in their places of worship, even everywhere where they're at, where progressive-minded people fueled by love are to be found. We need to meet them there, and we can't expect the working class to just develop political consciousness of their own, without us also being willing to get our hands dirty and help our communities, empower those individuals that are clamoring for change, that are clamoring for an opportunity to understand the world in a way that, frankly, I didn't understand until I met socialists, until I met people that educated me about class and educated me about colonialism and educated me about imperialism. So if we care to call ourselves socialists, dare I say even revolutionaries, if we're going to call ourselves that, we have to really rise to that responsibility that comes along with it. We have to set aside our differences, which is easier said than done in a lot of spaces, right? And we have to really face our existential crisis facing our communities and prioritize and not lose the forest for the trees. The idea of treating our movement like a scene or a lifestyle, which I see a lot. I mean, all of us see it a lot, especially on the internet, where it's this gatekeeping thing where, it just pervades every aspect of our organizing on social media, is indicative of really how much work we have to do, how far we have to go in order to build the unity that is really going to be needed if we're going to win. But I have informed faith I have informed faith that we can do it because I've seen organizers across all tendencies come together in the streets, not on some forum or whatever, but in the streets to fight for housing, healthcare, and education, to fight against war for profit, and to fight against capitalism here. I've seen that across all tendencies. So ultimately, we can't forget for one moment as organizers, as socialists, that it is capitalism that is killing our neighbors. It's capitalism that's killing the planet. And only the complete dismantling of this capitalist system is what's going to give us a chance at survival. And its replacement with socialism is what's going to give us a chance to right the historic wrongs, like what Mark was talking about. Reparations need to be paid. The only thing that will bring about that future that our communities deserve and need desperately right now, not tomorrow, is socialism. And it's really easy to forget those points about how important it is for us to come together, how important it is to build a unified movement in the face of organized fascism and a resurgent right that we're seeing in this country, when you're not out there doing work amongst the people. If you're not out there organizing and seeing how our people are, with all their beauty, with all their strength, but also all their contradictions, it's easy to find yourself in an echo chamber situation where you're just organizing the same 8 Brads over and over again and not knowing what's actually going on in our communities. So when I first met the movement, the movement at large, I was not a socialist. I was, not interested in century-old ideological disputes, nor the ego and false purity of, being in a movement that basically was powerless but had good feels and patted each other on the back a lot. I wasn't interested in that. I was drawn into socialism by the promise that it offered me of my liberation, literal liberation, in uniting our movements across ideological divisions against a common enemy. An enemy that right now is the most dangerous force the world has ever seen. Literally, the planet itself is endangered by this enemy that we all face, not only here, but worldwide. And really, we got to remember moving forward, these attacks against Councilmember Sawant in Seattle are part of an ongoing class war that we didn't start, right? We didn't fucking pull the trigger to start this, excuse my language. We, inherited this from a system that really only leaves suffering as, its inheritance to its children, right? Capitalism inherently leaves suffering and exploitation in its wake. In order to change that, we have to stand in solidarity with each other, with other socialists, with the people in our community, taking action across the country, like what's happening with Kshama Sawant, what's happening with Marco, who's bringing up a lot of these issues in spaces where the ruling class feel very comfortable to just carry out business as usual under the guise of civility. And really, we have to call out this hypocrisy right there in their face, not just, in this echo chamber that we find ourselves sometimes being pushed into by the bourgeoisie themselves and these bourgeois ideologies. So our movement is powerful. Most importantly, it's beginning to recognize its power. Socialists must be ready to meet the generations of those organizers who are coming out into the streets and wanting to organize. And, we have to let events like today, where we're coming together across our organizations to build relationships, we have to really let this be the start of a new era of socialist organizing in the United States. We have to let our history read how we came together from all walks of life against all odds to basically dethrone the most powerful empire and destructive empire the world has ever known in order to create the better world that we all know can exist right around the corner. So one last thing, solidarity obviously with the comrades in Seattle, fighting this far-right recall that's obviously fueled by wanting to continue exploitation in the status quo, solidarity with the global movement for socialism, and really let us here today, let our actions here today give new life to the old phrase that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, workers and oppressed workers, people of the world unite. Let's give that new lifeblood today here in our neighborhood and make it something that working class people are, proud to embrace, because there's a legacy there that we need to, uphold here. So thank you. I'm excited to talk about our campaign.
Woo!